Hey guys, this is Pug Weasel, otherwise known as Brad, with another prepper critique. Before I get started though, if I had a whole channel just dedicated to this, I think I would call myself the respectful dissenter, because that's really what I'm trying to do. And I won't lie to you, I do it for my own self-entertainment, and I'm not a prepper, but as I watch more and more prepper videos, which I just find fascinating, these are kind of some of the things that I think about, and so I'm just getting them out on video, and you can take it with a grain of salt, or you can take them very seriously. But today's topic is self-reliance versus resiliency, and it's really going to be about resiliency, because I know the prepper movement is very much about self-reliance, and especially obviously in a end of civilization kind of scenario. In any case, let's get right into it. I've watched more than one prepper video, and in those videos, some preppers have expressed what I consider to be a disdain for the poor, or at least people who receive some sort of government assistance, welfare, so on and so forth. And I find that they seem to dismiss those people very quickly. One such critic made the claim that if they showed up at her house, they would get what was coming to them. And she made a video about who would die first in a SHTF situation. And it's not that the video was that bad. I mean, if you just needed, you wanted that information, it's not necessarily that, the rest of it was horrible, or she was being down on everybody. It just seemed there was a little anger in her voice when she talked about inner city people who weren't going to be able to take care of themselves, and they were going to come after your stuff. So in any case, one of the examples she gave was the Superdome in Louisiana, in New Orleans, and how she said thousands of people died there. They were all stuck in there, and thousands of people died. And the fact is that it's not actually true. Thousands of people may have died in the entire aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, but and there were people who did die at the Superdome. In any case, though, the truth is that there were no reports of death due to starvation or dehydration at Superdome. There was heart attacks, and there were some stabbings, fights, things of that nature. But no one died of starvation or dehydration, which would be the number one concern for large groups of impoverished people who all of a sudden had no assistance. That's what I would think. And that was not the case. There were such deaths of starvation and dehydration at a certain nursing home in New Orleans, where the staff abandoned the patients, and they were fragile and couldn't take care of themselves, and a number of them died before the rest of them were found. And that is unfortunate, but that's a little different than poor people. That's the frail and the old. And so I wanted to just address that, because it goes to what I'm talking about. Here's the thing about resiliency. By definition, it's the ability to survive through and bounce back from illness, or being deprived of certain things that you need physically. And then of course there's a psychological element to it, and being able to bounce back and stay within the normal range even though you're going through some sort of hardship. Resiliency. Just to let you know, I've traveled to Kenya. I was there for 2 weeks, and I've also done mission trips to Haiti after the earthquake there. And one of the things I learned, or the biggest thing that I learned, was this: those who suffer the most survive suffering, or are more likely to survive suffering. Those who are used to going without a lot of food are less likely to starve. Those who are used to going without water or clean water are more likely to bear dehydration longer than others. As a matter of fact, if you were listening to some of the news reports from Haiti after the earthquake, and I mean going out a month, there was a 5-year-old child who was stuck under rubble for, I believe, 7 days without food or water. And that child is walking the earth today. There was a grown man who was under the rubble without food or water for over 18 days. That man is walking the earth today. Now, I've been told by doctors that for the most part, we as human beings can't go without water for 5 to 7 days or we'll die. But obviously Haitians, or at least this Haitian, specifically a Haitian child, lived for 5 to 7 days, 5 years old, and then a grown man for 18 days. And he was obviously type 1 anorexic when they pulled him out of that. That means that he was in a starvation mode. Type 2 anorexia is the psychological issue where you starve yourself on purpose. Type 1 is when you starve and you have no choice. In any case, this man did survive. Another thing to consider as a prepper is that you may train for combat situations, but any soldier who's been in combat, or any police officers that's been in a shootout or been shot at, will tell you the real thing is a lot different. Many inner city gang members have experienced urban warfare already. Not just gang members, but people who engage in whatever kinds of crime, drug dealers, people who work with drug dealers, people who rob, break into houses, so on and so forth. Many of them have stood next to their friends in shootouts, in the local inner city area close to where I live, and I work in corrections. I speak to these people on a regular basis. Many, I won't say many, because most criminals don't actually engage in gunplay, but many of these hardcore gang members and people in the drug game, they have actually been in shootouts with other gangs, with other people they have made enemies of, and they know what that kind of combat is like, okay? And it's a lot different than going to the range where you have a bunch of safety rules and you are not really being shot at yourself in a life and death situation. And again, soldiers will tell you that it's much different, okay? So there are people in the inner city with the experience to engage in warfare and know the psychological aspect of it and have lived through it and dealt with the violence. So you have to take that in consideration as to being resilient in what you're practicing for in the context of having to protect your home, or if you're out on the street, protecting yourself. Many preppers, as I'm sure many of you know, many preppers don't even do combat training of any sort. They're simply going out to the range and shooting at paper targets like the rest of us who aren't training for combat as well. And as a non-prepper, I can pretty much tell you that I haven't done any training for combat. Many of the people living in the inner city are working poor. They are not on welfare. They are not on food stamps. Or they may be on one and not on the other. They may be just receiving assistance in housing. In any case, though, that's a myth that if you think that just everybody down in the inner city is they're all getting their money from the government and they're not doing anything, that is a myth and it's not true. The ones that do know what it's like to go hungry, to be cold in the winter, and they weren't practicing it. Okay, so if you're going out on the weekends to maybe you're going winter camping so you can get used to it, or you're doing something like that and you're trying to prepare yourself to deal with it. There's a difference between being hungry and being cold for the weekend, knowing you're going to go back home to your house where your heat is and eat a big meal and have 3 meals a day, and actually being hungry and not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, or being cold because you can't afford to pay the bill and you know it's going to stay cold. It's going to be cold the next night. It's not going to be warm in a few days. Okay? I'm not a prepper, but for a period of my life, I lived in the inner city, and my mom and we were poor. She worked 3 jobs uh, to try to put food on the table, and she went without so we didn't have to, so I didn't have to feel it as much as she did. But this is the nature of most poor people, to do whatever they have to do in order to survive, no matter what it takes. And for some of those poor people, that means committing crimes. But for most, it doesn't. But to survive and do whatever you have to is in the poor person's psyche. And if you take the time to go out and meet people as opposed to go, volunteer at a shelter or something, you could discern this for yourself and kind of bust that myth you may have that they're all just sitting around being lazy and that's why they're poor. Only a fool would underestimate this group of people. Like I said, you may go camping and practice going without comforts, but when you live it, you are more likely to survive it, even if it's getting worse for you. And so, basically, that's my critique. If you're one of those people who says, oh, well, the poor are going to do just fine, they're going to find a way to survive, you're probably on top of things. If you've been walking around going, who I'm really worried about are those people over there in the poor part of town, whether they be white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, and I think they're going to come here and try to take my stuff because they know I got stuff and they don't have nothing and they won't survive without taking it from me. That may or may not be true, but if you think that they're going to lay down and die, you are mistaken. If you think that they're incapable of surviving, they're actually more likely to live without food longer than you. They're more likely to live without fresh water than you are. And they're likely to make it through the night on a cold night. They're more likely to make it than you are because you're used to sleeping in a warm bed. And they've been cold. They know what it's like. They've endured it already. So, the next time you're sitting around thinking about your prepper stuff and you say to yourself, we're here and we're doing it and we've really got it together, think again, because maybe you don't. This is Bug Weasel, otherwise known as Brad. Have a good night.